Young Dolph's killer is serving life plus 35 years, but his life behind bars is nothing like you'd expect. Justin Johnson has reportedly been attacked by inmates, caught with drugs and phones, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of what's been going on behind bars. Let me break it down. Every account of this case starts the same place, a Thanksgiving turkey giveaway that never happened because a rapper never made it there. On the morning of November 17, 2021, Young Dolph, real name Adolph Thornton Jr., was in Memphis. Not for a show, not for business. He was there for his mother. He founded his label, Paper Route Empire, and on the day he died, he'd stopped at Makeda's Cookies, a bakery in Memphis, reportedly to buy cookies for his mother. He never made it back to his car. According to testimony that would later come out in court, Justin Johnson and a second man, Cornelius Smith, didn't start that day with Dolph specifically in their sights. Smith said he and co-defendant Johnson set out on the morning of Nov 17, 2021, looking for somebody and didn't know who we were going to catch. They knew Dolph, and some of his artists were tied to a Thanksgiving event that day, so they drove in that direction. When they saw Young Dolph's car, followed him to a Memphis cookie shop, and opened fire in broad daylight. It wasn't a drive-by. It wasn't a single shot from a moving vehicle. It was an execution carried out in a strip mall in the middle of the day with Dolph inside buying cookies. Young Dolph was hit 22 times and died at the scene. The getaway wasn't clean either. Investigators would later say the car used to flee the scene was stolen, a white Mercedes-Benz. According to testimony that surfaced during a later trial in the case. That detail matters because it's part of what eventually tied Johnson to the shooting. Cell phone records, surveillance footage tracking his movements before and after, and video that placed him at the scene. Federal and local authorities didn't wait long to name him. The search was on for Justin Johnson, man named by federal authorities as a suspect in the murder case of rapper Young Dolph. He didn't stick around Memphis, he ran. For weeks, Johnson's whereabouts were unknown, his Instagram going quiet, his name spreading across every hip-hop news account in the country under his stage name, Straight Drop, an aspiring rapper who suddenly wasn't chasing a music career anymore. He was running from a murder warrant. It didn't last. Justin Johnson was captured in Indiana. U.S. Marshals said, the manhunt was over, but the legal reckoning was only getting started, and it would take almost 3 full years to reach a verdict. What's worth understanding here is who Johnson was before any of this. He wasn't some outside hitman brought in for a single job. Straight Drop, real name Justin Johnson, was a Memphis native and American gangster rapper chasing his own lane in the same city and the same industry Young Dolph had built an empire in. He had music out. He had a SoundCloud page. He had ambitions that on paper weren't that different from the man he's now spent years in a Tennessee prison for killing. He also wasn't a stranger to the system. Before Dolph's murder ever entered the picture, Johnson was already tangled up in a prior weapons case. Also known as rapper Straight Drop, the 23-year-old pled guilty to violating the terms of his supervised release relating to a past weapons charge. The violation list reads like a portrait of someone already sliding, not being regularly employed, missing mandatory drug screenings and therapy, failing to seek permission before leaving the jurisdiction, and being arrested. That federal violation alone got him reportedly sentenced to 2 years in prison. And that was before Memphis prosecutors even got him into a courtroom for the murder charge. By the time Johnson was formally charged in Dolph's killing, the list of counts against him was long. He faced charges of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm, employment of a firearm, and theft of property over $10,000. He wasn't alone either. Cornelius Smith was arrested alongside him, and a third name would eventually surface, Hernandez Govan, accused of being the connection between the shooters and whoever ordered the hit in the first place. The early motive floated by investigators and prosecutors centered on something bigger than a personal beef. Cornelius Smith testified that rapper Yo Gotti's brother, Anthony Big Juke Mims, had put out a $100,000 hit on Young Dolph, and had also put bounties on all the artists at Young Dolph's record label, Paper Route Empire. That's the backdrop prosecutors would eventually build their entire case on a feud between rival Memphis labels that turned into a bounty, and a bounty that turned into a murder in a cookie shop parking lot. Johnson's half-brother got pulled into it too, not as a shooter, but as someone who allegedly helped him vanish. Jamarcus pleaded guilty to 3 counts of being an accessory after the fact. Prosecutors say Jamarcus accepted a car and cell phone from Justin after the murder to help him escape Memphis amid a manhunt. So by the end of 2021 and into 2022, the picture was set. A rapper dead in broad daylight, a shooter caught in Indiana, a second shooter in custody, a third man accused of orchestrating it all, and a half-brother charged with helping the getaway. What nobody in Memphis knew yet was how long it would take for any of it to reach a jury, or what Johnson's life would start to look like once he was locked up waiting for that day to come. That wait turned out to be almost 3 years. And in that time, the man accused of killing one of Memphis's most beloved independent artists didn't exactly keep a low profile behind bars. Getting Justin Johnson in front of a jury took nearly 3 years, and when it finally happened, it moved fast. The trial opened in September 2024 in Memphis, with Shelby County Criminal Court Judge Jennifer Mitchell presiding. The centerpiece of the state's case wasn't just surveillance footage or cell tower records. It was a man who'd been in the car with Johnson that day. Co-defendant Cornelius Smith testified that the killing was part of a feud between rival record labels. Smith admitted to being the second shooter. He described the drive, the moment they spotted Dolph's car, the decision to follow him to the bakery. Prosecutors backed his testimony with hard evidence. Prosecutors presented evidence, including surveillance footage and phone records, linking Johnson to the crime. That included calls between Smith and Johnson right before the shooting, and a call between Johnson and Big Juke Mims immediately after. Video and cell phone evidence corroborated Smith's story, including calls between Smith and Johnson shortly before the killing and a call between Johnson and Big Juke immediately after. Money came up too, specifically how little of it Johnson ever actually saw. The defense argued there was no proof Johnson got a penny, while Smith testified he received $800 before he was arrested, and his defense attorney later received another $50,000. If there really was a six-figure bounty on Dolph's head, Johnson's cut by that account amounted to less than $1,000 up front. The jury didn't need long to make up its mind. Justin Johnson was found guilty of murder in the death of rapper Young Dolph after the jury heard testimony from a co-defendant that the killing was part of a feud between rival record labels, deliberating for just under 4 hours before finding Johnson guilty of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and being a felon in possession of a gun. The sentence for the murder count came down immediately in the same session. As the 13th juror, I affirm this verdict. As to the first-degree murder, I sentence you to life in prison. Shelby County Judge Jennifer Mitchell said, as Johnson sat quietly during the proceeding. He was 26 years old. Reaction came fast from every direction. Dolph's family released a statement through their publicist, calling the day bittersweet, describing him as a son, father, brother, friend, life partner, musical artist, philanthropist, mentor, and more. Mia J., Dolph's life partner, posted her own statement afterward, saying the verdict brings relief and restores my confidence in the justice system. Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy told reporters outside the courthouse that we will continue to make sure that all of those who are responsible for Young Dolph's death get the punishment they deserve. Johnson's own defense team didn't hide their disappointment. His attorney said his client was devastated by the verdict and vowed to pursue every possible avenue for appeal. That wasn't the end of the sentencing, though. Judge Mitchell had 2 more counts to deal with, and she came back 5 days later to hand those down. Johnson received a 35-year sentence for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and 15 years for possessing a handgun as a convicted felon. The math on that got confusing fast until Judge Mitchell clarified exactly how it would stack. She ordered those 2 sentences be served concurrently, so he serves his life sentence and then he starts serving his 35-year sentence. Assistant District Attorney Paul Hagerman had asked the court to go as high as it legally could, pointing to the danger the shooting posed to bystanders that day. The risk of life of individuals other than the victim in the case. The state would ask you to set maximum sentences, he told the court. Johnson wasn't done fighting it, though. His legal team filed an appeal, and it took over a year to work its way through the system. When it finally landed in March of 2026, the answer was the same one his defense had been dreading. The Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction of Justin Johnson, one of the men found guilty in the 2021 killing of Memphis rapper Young Dolph. The appeal had raised 4 separate issues. First, insufficient evidence. The court disagreed, citing video of Young Dolph's murder, as well as extensive cell phone records and surveillance video showing Johnson's movements before and after the shooting, plus Smith's testimony. Second, an objection to 2 autopsy-adjacent photographs shown to the jury. The trial judge's decision to allow the jury to see 2 photos of Young Dolph's body, one showing the gunshot wound to his face and the other showing the position of his body after the shooting, which the court found acceptable evidence. Third, a complaint about where Johnson was seated during the trial, which the court ruled was justified given security concerns tied to the high-profile nature of the case. And fourth, an objection to a prosecutor's closing argument comment about a witness who never took the stand, which the court dismissed because Johnson's attorneys did not object to the comment during the trial, only after the fact. The appellate opinion didn't mince words about the strength of the state's case, stating plainly that the evidence of defendant's guilt was overwhelming, and the prosecutor's comments were brief. That ruling closed the door on any state-level path back to freedom. Johnson is currently serving life in prison plus 35 additional years after his 2024 conviction, with no further appeals available in the state system. On paper, that should have been the story's end. A man convicted, sentenced, appealed, and shut down for good. But what makes this case keep circulating online isn't the courtroom part. It's what's been surfacing from inside the prison itself in the years between the verdict and the appeal. Long before the appeal was even filed, Justin Johnson was already making headlines from behind bars, and not because he was staying quiet. The first sign that Johnson wasn't exactly a model inmate came in late 2022 while he was still awaiting trial. He found a way to record and release actual music using a jail phone. The track was called No Statements, and the timing raised eyebrows. It dropped right around the period when Hernandez Govin, the alleged organizer of the hit, had just been picked up by authorities. The implication a lot of people online drew from it was that Johnson was using the song to signal he hadn't cooperated with investigators against Govin. Jail officials didn't take it well. He lost his phone privileges over it, and the restrictions that followed were strict. According to reporting at the time, he was cut off from contacting anyone outside besides his own attorney. That's a serious lockdown for a pre-trial detainee. No calls to family, no calls to friends, nothing but legal counsel. It didn't stop there. Months later, in the spring of 2023, Johnson was caught with contraband again. And this time, it was more than just an unauthorized phone call. Justin Johnson, also known as Straight Drop, was found with drugs and a phone on him in jail, according to the Shelby County Sheriff's Office. Investigators didn't disclose what specific drugs were recovered or exactly when the discovery happened. Only that SCSO did not say when he was found with the contraband or what drugs were found, but did say that they are actively investigating the case. By that point, it was already his second known contraband incident behind bars, following the phone he'd used months earlier to release a rap song through a jail phone in November of 2022. For a man facing a first-degree murder charge, getting caught twice with contraband while awaiting trial isn't a small footnote. It's a pattern. It suggests someone who either had access to outside help smuggling items in, or who simply wasn't worried about the consequences of getting caught. Because the murder charge already loomed so much larger than anything a contraband violation could add. Then came the incident that turned Johnson from a name in court filings into a recurring subject of prison violence chatter across hip-hop media. Reports that he'd been attacked by other inmates. Multiple outlets picked up the story that Johnson had been jumped while incarcerated, with early reports describing him as being in serious condition afterward. One report characterized it starkly, describing him as reportedly in critical condition after the incident. Separate coverage described him being struck, with one report using the word socked while in custody, an account that first surfaced through TMZ. It's worth being direct about what's confirmed here and what isn't. The specific severity of his injuries, the identity of whoever attacked him, and the exact facility where it happened weren't laid out in detail in the reporting that circulated. But the through line across multiple independent reports was consistent. Justin Johnson, the man who killed Young Dolph, has been targeted by violence inside the system that's now holding him for the rest of his life. In a prison population, being known as the man who executed a beloved local artist in front of witnesses is not a quiet reputation to carry. It draws attention, and in Johnson's case, some of that attention has apparently turned physical. None of that, though, seems to have knocked him off the path he was already on before any of it happened, trying to build a rap career from inside a cell. under his stage name, Straight Drop Johnson has kept putting out music since his conviction, using the same over-the-phone recording method that got him in trouble the first time. Outlets covering hip-hop news have specifically flagged new tracks surfacing from him well after his sentencing, describing new material as having dropped straight from the penitentiary. It's a strange kind of persistence, a man serving life plus 35 years, still chasing the same rap dream he had before any of this happened, using contraband phones as his only studio. And then there's the part of this story that pulled in the most attention of all, the photos. Images have circulated online showing Johnson inside a Tennessee Department of Correction facility, dressed in what looked like designer sneakers with an AP watch. Shorthand in street and hip-hop culture for an Audemars Piguet, one of the most expensive watch brands in the world, visible on his wrist. The images spread fast across social media accounts that track hip-hop and true crime stories. Framed with a mix of disbelief and outrage, how does a man serving a life sentence for murdering a rapper end up photographed looking like he's still living some version of the lifestyle he had on the outside? There's no official confirmation from the Tennessee Department of Correction validating the authenticity of every detail in those images. And prison systems don't typically issue statements confirming what specific items an inmate is or isn't wearing in photos that leak out through unofficial channels. What is clear is that the images exist, that they've circulated widely, and that they've become the single most talked about piece of this entire story online. More than the trial, more than the appeal, more than the sentencing hearing itself. Part of why those photos hit so hard is the contrast. This isn't a random inmate. This is the man convicted of shooting Young Dolph 22 times in front of witnesses at a bakery. For a lot of people following the case, especially in Memphis, the idea that he might have any access to designer items or luxury accessories while serving a life sentence for that crime feels like an insult layered on top of the original one. But Johnson wasn't the only person facing consequences tied to that November afternoon. To understand the full weight of what happened and why the case dragged on in Memphis courtrooms for years after his own conviction was locked in, you have to look at the other men who were in the car in on the plan or accused of paying for the whole thing. Justin Johnson wasn't alone in that Mercedes, and he wasn't the only person Memphis prosecutors spent years trying to hold accountable for Young Dolph's death. Start with the man who was actually sitting next to him when the shots were fired, Cornelius Smith. Smith was the state's key witness against Johnson, the co-defendant who took the stand and walked the jury through exactly what happened that morning, from the aimless drive looking for a target to the moment they spotted Dolph's car. His cooperation was central to convicting Johnson, but Smith's own case dragged on for years after that testimony, partly because of concerns about his safety once word got out that he'd cooperated with prosecutors. His attorney was blunt about the stakes, saying ever since the case began, there has been a concern about his safety from multiple facets in this situation, after he testified especially, and that they wanted to be sure that whatever sentence he gets, he'll be able to serve it safely. Smith's case finally resolved in the spring of 2026. Cornelius Smith, who was originally charged with first-degree murder, accepted a plea deal to a lesser charge of second-degree murder, with additional charges of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, employing a firearm with intent to commit a felony, unlawful carrying of a weapon, and theft of property dropped as part of the agreement. He was sentenced to 20 years in the Tennessee Department of Corrections. Compare that to Johnson's life plus 35. The man who admitted to actually being one of the two shooters ended up with a fraction of the time, largely because his testimony helped convict the other men in the case. Then there's Hernandez-Govan, the man prosecutors spent years describing as the connective tissue between the shooters and whoever wanted Dolph dead in the first place. Prosecutors alleged Govan was the go-between, the person who allegedly recruited Johnson and Smith and linked them to the bounty. His trial finally happened in August 2025, and it did not go the way the state expected. A jury found Hernandez-Govan not guilty on all charges related to the murder of Young Dolph, clearing him of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder after deliberating 2 hours and 45 minutes. Govan's reaction outside the courtroom made headlines of its own. "Thank you to the jury for getting this right and getting my life back," Govan said. "I knew in my heart I was innocent. Without God, I don't even think I would have made it this far." His attorney, Manny Aurora, used his closing arguments to go after the entire prosecution, telling jurors, "This whole county is a freaking embarrassment in regard to this trial. The whole world is watching and this is what we got." Prosecutors pushed back hard in their own closing, firing back at Aurora's characterization of the city and reasserting their theory of how the men were connected. Justin and Cornelius were put together by Hernandez Govan. He chose to ask each of them for a piece of the proceeds. The jury didn't buy it. Govan had already turned down a plea deal before the trial started betting on an acquittal, and it paid off. Govan, who was previously released on a $90,000 bond, had already rejected a plea deal. District Attorney Steve Mulroy, who'd stood outside the courthouse after Johnson's conviction, promising accountability for everyone involved, had a much more measured statement after Govan walked. "We have to respect a jury's decision even if we disagree with it," he said. That left one more name still hanging over the whole case: Anthony Big Juke Mims, Yo Gotti's brother. The man Cornelius Smith testified had put out the six-figure bounty that allegedly started the entire chain of events. Mims never faced trial for his alleged role in ordering Dolph's death. Big Juke was shot and killed outside a restaurant in January 2024. Killed himself before any court ever had the chance to test the claims made against him in Johnson's and Govan's trials. Whatever role he actually played in setting Dolph's murder in motion, according to Smith's testimony, died with him. And there's one more figure who never fired a shot but still ended up in a courtroom over this: Jermarcus Johnson, Justin's half-brother. He pleaded guilty back in 2023 to helping Justin and Smith stay in contact and evade capture while they were on the run in the days after the shooting. Years after that plea, he still hadn't been formally sentenced. Based on the most recent reporting available on his case, a loose thread in a story that for everyone else involved had already reached its conclusion. So by the middle of 2026, the full accounting looked like this: one man serving life plus 35 years with no appeals left. One man who admitted to being a second shooter, walking away with 20 years after cooperating. One alleged mastermind acquitted entirely and reportedly planning to leave Memphis. And one man who allegedly ordered it all dead in an unrelated shooting before he ever had to answer for it in court. Out of everyone connected to that Thanksgiving week ambush, Johnson is the only one who's actually going to die in custody, unless something changes. Which brings the story back to where the online conversation has really centered, not on the legal outcome, which is settled, but on what Johnson's day-to-day existence inside that outcome actually looks like. Here's where Justin Johnson's story sits right now, in the second half of 2026, locked into a sentence that isn't going anywhere, in a system that's already shown it can't fully keep contraband or violence away from him. The legal path is completely closed. The Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals ultimately decided none of Johnson's four arguments warranted a new trial, meaning his life sentence for Young Dolph's 2021 murder remains final, and he is currently serving life in prison plus 35 additional years after his 2024 conviction, with no further appeals available in the state system. There's no pending motion, no scheduled hearing, no next court date that could change anything about how long he stays in custody. Barring a commutation or some future legal development, nobody's currently predicting Johnson dies in the Tennessee Department of Correction. What that actually looks like day to day is where things get less clear-cut and where the internet's fascination with this case has really taken hold. The rap career hasn't stopped. Straight Drop is still technically an active artist, releasing music recorded through jail and prison phone lines years after his conviction. The same method that got him disciplined the first time around back in 2022. It's a strange kind of defiance, using the one tool prison officials keep confiscating to keep chasing the exact same goal he had walking into this whole situation. The contraband issues that defined his pretrial detention, the unauthorized phone, the drugs, the loss of contact privileges, set a tone that appears to have carried into his life as a convicted, sentenced inmate. And the reports of him being attacked by other inmates point to something prison officials rarely advertise, but that anyone who's covered high-profile cases understands well. Notoriety inside a prison population cuts both ways. Being known as the man who killed a beloved public figure doesn't just draw curiosity. In Johnson's case, according to multiple reports, it's drawn violence. Then there are the photos, the sneakers, the watch, The entire aesthetic of someone who, based on the pictures alone, doesn't look like a man serving the rest of his natural life behind bars. Those images are the reason this story keeps resurfacing on social media timelines years after the actual conviction. They don't change the sentence, they don't reopen the case, but they've become the lens through which a lot of people now view the entire aftermath. Proof, in the eyes of a lot of viewers, that a life sentence doesn't necessarily mean the kind of stripped-down, restricted existence people assume it does. What's harder to see in any of this is closure. For Dolph's family, or for the city that lost him, Mia J's statement after the 2024 verdict spoke to a certain kind of relief, a sense that the justice system had done its job. The Shelby County DA's office echoed that same sentiment months later when Cornelia Smith's plea finally closed out the last open case connected to the murder, calling Dolph a beloved member of this community whose death was a tragedy, his murder an outrage. But relief and resolution aren't quite the same thing. Govan walked. Big Juke died before ever facing a jury. The man who fired alongside Johnson got 20 years instead of life. And the one man everyone agrees pulled a trigger that day is, according to reports and images that have circulated widely, still finding ways to project a version of the life he had before any of this happened. From inside a facility that's supposed to represent the furthest possible remove from it. That's the part of this case that never really got resolved in a courtroom because it isn't a legal question. It's not something an appeals court can rule on. It's the gap between what a life sentence is supposed to represent, total loss, total consequence, and what it can actually guarantee once someone's inside the system serving it. Justin Johnson will die in Tennessee custody. That part is locked. What his life looks like between now and then, the reporting so far suggests, is a lot less controlled than most people would assume a life plus 35 sentence should be. Young Dolph was 36 years old when he was killed buying cookies for his mother. Justin Johnson was 26 when a jury convicted him of doing it. Right now in a Tennessee prison, that's the version of accountability the system has produced. A man who will never walk free again, still chasing a rap career, still making headlines, and still, based on everything that's surfaced since his sentencing, finding ways to be seen.